I am a mother of two. Before I was a mom, I lived abroad. I did schooling abroad, and I have a bachelor's of science in kinesiology, which is a fancy way for saying the study of movement.
Right.
My focus is on fitness, health, and nutrition. And so when I graduated, I was doing personal training, as well as teaching group exercise classes. And it wasn't until fairly late in life, I'm going to say, I didn't get married till I was 31. And I didn't become a first-time mom until I was 32. So I got to experience a lot of stuff and a lot of life before I got to that point. Basically my background was never homeschooling. I mean, I went to public school. I also went to private school. It was never on my radar. And we moved from the Los Angeles area to a smaller area, and decided we didn't like the school system. Some of the teachers are great, but none of the schools had great scores. And we decided that instead of me going back to work when our oldest was old enough, that I would homeschool her.
Now, is your firstborn the one with apraxia or the younger child?
It's the younger one. So
you were already trained with homeschooling before you had an apraxic child. So
correct.
Okay, so like as far as the difference between homeschooling a neurotypical child, which you had experience with, and now you have your second child, you find out your child has apraxia. What was that like?
Honestly, I was scared. How am I mean, I know that I'm fully capable of teaching a child to read that knows everything normally, that can look at words and know that A makes A or A sounds. But when you're talking about apraxia, it's so specific. They don't know how to make those sometimes. They don't know how to recognize letters. And so when she was first diagnosed at 3, we had to take a step back, and we knew we couldn't do it all on our own. But the firm belief in the program we were using, plus additional therapies, is the way we decided to go. And it's been really successful. She just turned 6 last Friday. And she's reading CVC words. I mean, it's later than my oldest? Absolutely. But she's making progress, and it's not untypical for a 6-year-old to be at that point.
I actually just found out that I shared the wrong Zoom link. You had the right one. Jolie just told me
the right one was in comments. The right one was in comments, but the one up top was for last week's.
Oh no. Eeks.
So the only reason I knew is because I clicked on the first one, and then when it sent me the okay for it, I'm like, oh, that's the one from last week. And so then I went down and read in comments, and the right one was shared.
Let me go fix that now. Well, fortunately we have, we're just starting now.
Okay, good.
Every week we have some kind of like technical error.
It's technology. I fully expect it.
I know. It's nobody told me up until now. Okay, hold on a second. Let me just know what's in the comments.
While you're doing that, I'm going to say hi to everybody. I'm Sara. I'm going to take a sip from my Anna and Elsa cup that happens to be next to me, because we leave water all over the house, and this is what happens to be here. And so that's homeschool life. Especially when you have 2 girls that like frozen.
So what
I'm also going to say I'm in my dedicated area of the house for schooling. Since I do this professionally now, I have a kind of a wall that has bookcases and all of our resources. And if you don't mind moving later, I can show you what I have, but you certainly don't need everything that I have. You can kind of get away with homeschooling, depending on the age, with letter tiles, puzzles, a whiteboard, a calendar, basically basic stuff. So everything I have is kind of what I've accumulated since I started homeschooling my oldest, who is now 8. So don't feel like you have to have this all the time. Some people homeschool with like one of those art trifold boards with they put the backings on it. You can put the 3M stickies on it, and they just change those out. So this is more than some and less than others. I'm kind of in the middle.
You know what? I'm hoping this is, when you said it's in the comments, I think the same one I have up top is the same one in the comments.
No, it was the post from yesterday, I believe.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
And maybe if people were looking for that one, they were.
Oh no. Okay, hold on.
If anybody has any questions, I'm kind of watching the live stream. It'll be a little delayed. If anybody has any questions starting off, I can start addressing those. Anybody have any questions?
Well, I'll ask a question. If
Okay,
nobody has
go for it.
questions, while I'm looking for the actual link, how we ended up here, I don't know. But if you can talk a little bit about like how you coordinate home education, homeschooling, and therapy, and how you do that at home too.
Okay, well, before we had this issue with everybody having to be at home, my youngest has 4 therapies out of the house a week. She has 3 speech therapies and 1 occupational therapy appointment. And basically what that looks like is a lot of car time, a lot of driving, but we take our stuff with us. Any of the core stuff that I feel needs props or a little bit of extra on the whiteboard, we will do at home, and I'll prime them for that before we leave. And then once we're at the actual therapy appointment, my oldest will work on her worksheets that she has for the day, while my youngest does her speech therapy. And on Thursdays, she happens to have 2 speech therapies. And so we spend a lot of time in waiting rooms because of that. But generally, we are done with our worksheets before we get home. This age, elementary age, even through, I would say, maybe 5th grade, you really don't need to pack in 8 hours of schooling a day. I mean, that's kind of the time that they have allotted at public school. However, they really need like 1.5, 2 hours. And it's really not something where you have to feel like you have to fill that time with actual schoolwork.
That's actually really very helpful advice, because that's, I think, very difficult for a lot of the parents that are now thrown into homeschooling to know that they don't have to be doing this for 8 hours a day. So about how long do you homeschool for?
On average, it's about, my oldest one, who's 8, will get about 1.5 hours of actual paper time. And when I talk about paper time, it's worksheets, working out problems, reading story problems, and deciphering those for question and answer. The rest of our day is spent with experimentation. We bake, we plant, we read. You go for a nature walk and you point out the things that are around your house and what you can use them for. As a matter of fact, we have a whole field full of a weed called shepherd's purse. And so you go out and you pick it and you find out what shepherd's purse is and you see what it's good for medicinally. And you can press it between, a book in between two papers, and you can have older ones write up something about it, and they have that forever. That hands-on learning is the core of what we do on a daily basis.
That
the
sounds
paperwork,
amazing.
it is. I mean, you don't get that in most public schools. And you can do that when your kids are at home. They're still doing the book work. My 8-year-old is reading really fabulously. And, she was actually skipped ahead a grade because of how far ahead she was in reading and math. And so, and of course that's kid dependent too. And, so then, I had this really amazing kid that is skipping ahead. And then all of a sudden I realized that I have an apraxic child who is just as smart. She just can't express it. And so you kind of have to rule it in and just go, okay, how do I do this? So it's been interesting because most homeschoolers will tell you that the program that they start with one kid is not the same thing that they will do with another. And if you look at resources for homeschoolers and like buy-sell trade groups with homeschoolers, you'll always see this program didn't work for my kid. It worked for kid number 1. So I'm selling this at cost.
So that's another recommendation then, is to join, like for parents who are now thrown into pandemic homeschooling, and I know some of them, like Jolie can probably talk about her experience. Some of them have more, and some have less, involvement with the public school, depending on which district you're in and what they're providing. But joining groups for homeschoolers to get that information, because, kind of getting that supplement. How does it work as far as, as far as, like, I know you said some programs work better than others. Online, I know for anybody, we can share this after, but Sara wrote a blog with a lot of her recommendations for some of the programs she recommends, but to talk about the difference between book programs versus online learning, something that you have a membership to versus something that a la carte, like what is your view there?
It depends. I mean, every kid is so different. The biggest thing about homeschooling is that I would try everything free first to see what your child does really good with. There's some great programs out there. And I happen to buy all my curriculum used, all the teachers editions. I haunt eBay like crazy to find these editions that are, $80 through the website, but you can get them for $15, $20 on eBay. And are they perfect? No, but they work and they have all the information in them. And then I buy the workbooks new. Occasionally I have found used workbooks through the buy-sell trade groups. But sometimes they have writing in them. So it just kind of depends. You have to be picky with those. The online programs, there are some really great ones, but they don't work for every kid. And you have to look for something especially for apraxia or other neuro speech conditions. You need to look for something that you can slow down. Some of these things talk so fast. And I know with my daughter, she has an auditory processing issue as well. And
Okay.
So when you try to hear what they're talking about, she misses half of the story they're reading. So to be able to have the controls to slow down how the speed on what they're saying, the story, or having them repeat the sounds that they're working on is one of the key things I would look for in a program. There's tons of great apps. I gave you a bunch, right. But some will have that repetition and some won't. So it really is, it's a little bit, it's daunting because there's so much out there. There's a couple of really great apraxia groups. And, you know, every once in a while, somebody will ask, what's a good app? And you'll get, you know, 100 different recommendations. But
there's
based off of
groups just for apraxia, or there's, you know, as far as
I know there's one, it's not very active. And there's one that's more locally Los Angeles, and there's hardly anybody ever posting on there. So it's, you know, yes, homeschooling has a big following, but then as you get smaller, it's like, okay, well, I have a child with a disability, so you get smaller. And then I have a child with apraxia, you get smaller. And then I have a child with apraxia and auditory processing, it gets smaller, you know, so it's narrowing down something that works for your child specifically. Boo articulation is great. The Busy Series apps are great. You have to kind of pay for those.
And that's BOO articulation, right?
BOO articulation. The Busy Series, which has like Busy Shapes 2, and Busy Water, are great for problem solving, because you have to put the shapes, or you have to get the fish from the one tube to the other without it getting eaten by the cat. So it's kind of fun, but it gets them to think about which way they have to move, which a lot of kids, when they're, you know, apraxia is speech, but it can also, it's very rarely by itself.
Right.
I'm sure you have all these different comorbidities, and you go, you know what, my kid does, you know, problem solving great, but maybe they need more help with memory. And so then you'll start looking at memory apps. And I would start with something like a memory game that has like a 4x2 board. So just, you know, 2 rows of 4. And then as they get really good at those, you move them up to a 6x4, and then an 8x5. So as they're getting better, they're moving these things in their brain, and they're figuring out where all these things go. And you can actually see the progress between their memory, their working memory, and what they're actually seeing on an app. It's kind of amazing. These games, they have a lot of validity. So,
Jolie,
hashtag life, real life.
Bella. Jolie, did you, as far as like, because Jolie's one of the parents thrown into homeschooling. She wasn't a homeschooler before.
Okay.
She's a homeschooler now. So she was that's why, you know, Jolie, I'll let you ask some questions, because I have so many questions, even though my kids are now 23 and 25, but I'm fascinated by, you know, anyone that can homeschool, as far as, you know, having that ability. And also I think it's great to be able to spend that much time with your kids. You know, like, we lose a lot of time when they're at school.
It is,
and it isn't. I can tell you that now that my kids are 23 and 25, you know,
yeah.
You know, that, you know, there's like the downside of like, oh, I don't have the time, I have all this stuff to do, but you know, this time is going to be very precious for all of you guys that have all this time to spend with your children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would go with yes, it is, and it isn't. And I think that changes hour by hour. So, and I'm guessing that looking back on this time now, yes, it would be an absolute yes.
I'm on the other side from you guys, because my kids are now grown. Yeah. So it's like, oh, I wish I had more time with them, you know, like, because they,
I mean,
you know,
I think it's different because
they grow so quick. I mean,
right, but both myself and my husband are both working. So working full time and being thrown in to this.
I don't know if you saw the part where, depending on your kid's age, for elementary school, you really don't need to be doing more than an hour and a half of work a day.
Right. And I would say that's about as long as it takes her to do her assignment. Okay. That's about as long. It probably takes her maybe, you know, I mean, we don't do it all in one chunk. So we kind of do piecemeal. And so I would say with a little bit of the encouraging added on top of it, it's probably maybe about 2 to 2.5 hours total, maybe, but probably 2 hours, where, you know, it takes us a little bit of build up to get to the next thing, and then we do the thing. So each portion of her assignments probably takes her 15 minutes, and she has 4 of those to do.
Okay.
You know, 4
that
different
sounds
subjects.
reasonable.
And we check in with the extra teachers, like her, the PE teacher also has a Google Classroom, the art teacher, the music teacher. So we kind of check in with what they're doing. And if it fits, you know, what she's interested in, then we'll kind of throw in one of those lessons, you know, just to break up the day in the afternoon. Yeah.
That sounds reasonable. I mean, I would just say, you know, because this is such a change for everyone. I mean, I started my kids this way, so it's kind of what we do. But since it's such a change for everyone, don't feel like you have to get it all done. And just remember too, that you have a whole summer coming up, and you can kind of stretch that out a little bit for the stuff that, you know, maybe you don't need to have all the art stuff done now, you know, save it for later, and you can do some of that later.
Well, I mean, I will say there's been a ton, as I'm multitasking here.
Yeah, no, you're good.
I'm cutting open some fluff. Anybody wants to play with fluff? I think it's been really fun with all the extra resources that have become available. And I have to say, you know, I imagine that for an actual homeschooling parent, it has to be, you know, kind of fun to have these extra resources, like with Mo Willems doing his videos, and then with the different museums and the zoos doing virtual tours and doing, I mean, we've been watching a lot of the zoos and the aquariums with the different things that and so it's fun to be able to have those extra kind of resources that are, like you said before, sort of almost like an accidental education lesson, right? Like a learning lesson. So you're learning about marine life, or you're learning about these animals in kind of a more natural way. Or with Mo Willems, he's teaching them to draw, and he's reading the books, and they're, you know, so it's more organic, I guess, right?
It is organic. And I think the biggest thing to take away from it is that on a normal, like, I've been home more in the last month than I've been home in the last 2 years. And we homeschool all the time. So, you know, with the way we do schooling is we do 6 lessons a week. So we're done by the 2nd week of March, because then we use the next couple months to go to museums and aquariums. And so we're kind of bummed that we don't get that this time.
So in a sense, so we're getting that kind of an experience, though. We're just getting it from our living room, from the TV.
Yeah, but it is fun to be able to go. Like, if that's part of the curriculum, you know, like.
But even on a day-to-day, to not be able to go to a playground or go to a park or go to do these things that we're used to doing, you know, in the world, it's just kind of everybody's kind of in the same bubble. You know.
Yeah.
Well, just to kind of throw this in for next week, we are going to have Michael Gonzalez Wallace, who's the author of Super Body, Super Brain, and he is going to talk about fitness from home. He's been on Oprah and all different TV shows, and so I don't know.
I like listening to him.
Yeah, you know, I said I'm going to maybe do the Zoom meeting in my workout gear, because I don't know if he's going to throw in a couple exercises for us to do while we're talking. And also backgrounds in fitness too. So it's, you know, what do you do for fitness? Like, what is your phys ed at home for homeschooling?
So on a normal basis, the girls do hula dance lessons and a ninja class. And so those have both gone virtual. We live on 5.5 acres also, so we get plenty of farm work done. And then of course they have their gardening stuff that they're doing as well. You know, physical education should be whatever is accessible to you, that makes you feel better is how I look at it. And with kids, you know, not every kid is physically inclined. And some kinds with apraxic kids, you know, they don't necessarily, you know, with sensory processing disorder, they may not know where their body fits in space, and their balance may not be great, and their coordination may not be great. And of course, in a live class, like the ninja class, they work on that stuff. So, I mean, to try to replicate some of that stuff at home, I mean, I have the exercise stretchy bands, And I literally put them on the floor and have her do heel toe, heel toe, heel toe along that stretchy band. Yes, it's on the floor, but it's still a physical reminder of trying to balance on something,
Right.
Without having to fall off of anything.
Now, do you also have, we did a lot, both my kids were special needs when they were younger. So we did the ball pit, and I love the ball pit because I was able to take all the balls that were, because I had 2 boys, all the balls laying around the house all went into the ball pit. Everything went into the ball pit. And then also baby trampoline. Then when they got a little older, I got the big trampoline. We always had a pool when we're in Florida now. So we've had a pool, and swimming is always, year round, they can swim. When we were in Jersey, we had a horse and a pony, which that was, they were too little to really do much.
Well, that's hippotherapy. Yeah.
They were too little really before we moved to Florida. I mean, they did a little bit of it, but that's, yeah. Here they get swimming with the dolphins. I don't know if there's really a lot of benefit, but they loved it, that kind of thing.
I think anytime you can get a child who is hesitant about their body and where their body is in space, and get them to enjoy physical education or physical movement of any type, I think it's all beneficial. It's not just a physical wellness that you're looking for that mental wellness, something that they know they can do. Because I mean, let's face it, they go to therapy and they're told, no, they're doing it wrong. And it's nice. It's a nice way that they're told that they're not doing it right, but they're still told that.
Right.
And so to give them the space and the freedom to experience their body in a safe environment, something they enjoy. If it's outside skipping rope for an hour and that's what they want to do, let them do it. Anything that they can use their body for. If it's, my little one will get on her scooter and she'll be on that thing for, 45 minutes. Hey, I'm not gonna, I tell her to switch her legs is basically what it is. No, you have to use your other leg now. Make sure there's some kind of body balance, but something where it makes them feel more confident and then they're comfortable doing. So I think, swimming with the dolphins, great. They're out there swimming.
So that's with, as far as like all of that with exercise, I also found that just to kind of bounce off what you just said, karate was a really good supplemental activity because they're constantly giving awards. Like my kids I don't even know how old, I don't want to embarrass them, they were, that they had in the room their little trophies and their little badges, from karate. Because, like they are constantly giving them awards. And I thought karate was really good for kids with a speech impairment too, because they're doing things as a group. But if it's a karate studio that has kids with special needs, they usually have a shadow there who kind of like is around the kids that need extra help, but the kids in the class don't realize they just think it's just somebody, another instructor in the class who he just happens to shadow the kids that need that extra support. But like when they're making noises, they're doing it as a group. So even if they're not saying anything, nobody's going to know. And it's self-esteem, because you can work on speech at any age, but self-esteem, that's very precious. You don't want that destroyed.
Yeah, there's key ages where you kind of have to implement self-esteem. And, especially with the school part of it, if your child doesn't think they can do it at a certain age, that's going to be what carries through for the rest. So that's why, right now it's kind of crisis schooling. This is not how I would normally do homeschooling. And it's not how I would suggest anybody does homeschooling on a normal day-to-day basis. But you're able to because you were their first teacher. There's life all around you. And if you're frustrated with the bookwork or the worksheets that's been put in front of you, go bake something in the kitchen. That's science. It's math. If you need to get out of the house, like for your own sanity, they probably need to get out of the house for their sanity. go on a nature walk, find a place that is closer to your house, that you know generally isn't busy. Take a nature book with you. Pick out some flowers in the book and see if you can spot them on the trail. Take pictures, have them work on photography, make a photography portfolio for them so that they remember that
Great idea.
this time wasn't all about being stuck at home with mom and worksheets. It was about actually getting out and seeing the rest of it. And when you have parents that have to work full time, that's a lot harder. So make sure that those weekends when you're not working are, kind of packed with those. I know you're exhausted. My husband works full time. He's essential. So he's working from, dark in the morning till dark at night and doesn't get home until after 8:30. So, I do everything by myself. And by the time I get to the weekend, I'm tired. I know he's tired, but, I'm tired too. But, sometimes those weekends are the only times as a family that you can go out and have those great outdoor experiences. And I think adding that in and having that be part of your homeschooling right now is essential to keeping everybody sane.
I really love the way you described how it's so organic and part, how you take everyday life and make it educational. And I know we're getting close to the half an hour, so I just want to also bring up homeschooling right now is something that everyone's kind of thrown into, but it also should be something that parents should, not just for the reason that you said, for you're not happy with the curriculum at school, but also for children that go through bullying, where, when we talk about self-esteem, we talk about bullying. There are parents who homeschool, and it doesn't have to be forever. It could be for a year or two, just to get over a hump or a really bad year. So to maybe address that, this is something, it's another option. And maybe it's something that people haven't thought about.
I think that kind of goes along with the self-esteem. If you have to look at it as, if you have a child that is so withdrawn from the school environment that they are crying every day before they go to school, they come home and they don't want to talk about, that is not a healthy environment. You wouldn't want to work in an environment that way. And you would try to do your best to find another job.
Right.
And sometimes for the state of our kids' mental health, we have to pull them out of those situations, because those are decisions only we can make. And making sure that they are mentally prepared. And some of our kids aren't. I mean, if they've been ever remarked about the fact that they don't talk well, or remarked about the fact that, they don't do things the same way that somebody else does, that seed is already there. And to compound that with everyday stuff, it is better to reassess what you can do at home instead of sending them to that environment. Sometimes it's a matter of switching environments, but sometimes it's a matter of pulling them out. And homeschooling doesn't have to be in the daytime. I know a few of my friends that the only time they can homeschool is in the evenings, and that's what works for them. And sometimes that's what you'd have to do. Finding somewhere for them to go during the day would be your biggest issue. But, ultimately your child's mental state and how they receive the information that they're getting, if you're sending them to school for an entire year and all they could think about is how much they hate school, they're not taking in any of that education. So it would be better for, investigate your options. And if you need to, pull them out. There are co-ops, we call them homeschooling co-ops, where, and sometimes those are available through charter schools. Do you have charter schools in Florida? Do you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are co-ops where you can, if you're not able to teach, you can pay that other homeschooling parents will teach your child during a certain period of time. And usually it's because they have a specialty in something. So somebody who had a degree in science or really loves science is teaching your child science. And so those are options as well. There's a lot of options out there, and because we're in kind of a weird time, you might not have heard of them, but it's not just the online virtual stuff that's there.
Right. There's quite a few co-op preschools out there that are very much more popular, I think, but that are much more in the mainstream of the way people, talk about preschools, that, you have your private preschools, some schools have a preschool program in early education, but then also there's the co-ops, and the co-ops are really popular, I would say.
The co-ops are great. I mean, sometimes you find the most imaginative and inspired teachers in those co-ops. So it's definitely worth looking into. They do have them for older kids. Sometimes you do have to look further and harder. And sometimes they will require you to teach a subject, but sometimes they're full and they don't need you anyways.
Yeah, the preschool is usually, I think there's a little bit more involvement on the parents have to take a turn, but that's part of because you're getting the preschool and you're not paying for it. So anyways, the preschool is a little bit different of a structure, but I do know of other people that that are homeschooling, but they do, I guess I've not heard of it in the saying that it's a co-op, but I've heard of that, where it's not just they're doing online learning, they're also doing other things and with other homeschoolers or other, they have other classes that they go to.
Yeah, well, and actually I teach through a place that does kind of co-op classes. I teach science and I teach history, and it's for 5 to 9 year olds. And so for an hour and a half, I have them once a week. And we do all kinds of stuff. Right now it's on Zoom, so it's not quite as interesting. We didn't get to do our leprechaun pudding, but you kind of roll with it. And so once it's back live, it'll be a lot more fun and interesting. But those co-op classes exist. Sometimes they're called hybrid school classes. Sometimes they're called co-op school classes. And sometimes they might be called alternative school classes. So those are kind of 3 key terms that you could look up and see if there was anything available in your area. All of them are going to be online right now. But a lot of them are being held by Zoom. Outschool is one of those that is kind of the same way.
Oh, you
Outschool is one of those things. They have all types of classes. If you're not getting a math class, like if you're not getting a concept in their math work, I bet you can find that class on Outschool. It's a pretty big resource for being able to find out how to do it. And I suggest you watch with them just to be able to reinforce whatever the concept is. Some of them are weekly classes and some of them are one-time classes. They have a lot of one-time art classes as well. So if you were looking for something just for, an hour or two to get a break, that's a great resource as well.
And I know you probably know this. There is an organization for homeschoolers that's national, and I can share this as well, but for speech therapy when everything's back to normal, depending, there's some states in the US that consider, and you may know this offhand, but some states consider homeschoolers a private school and provide therapy and some don't. So you can check your state, and then even if you're homeschooling, you can bring your child to the public school for whatever therapies in the IEP.
It does depend on the state. When my youngest, she was first diagnosed at 3, we're in California. So when she was first diagnosed at 3, the school district, our local school district, had to provide the testing and IEP. And then she was given speech only through the district. Now, I was told that I could no longer receive that unless I enrolled her in the district as a actual student when she was kindergarten eligible. And I said, well, there's no way she's going to go here. So I actually enrolled her in a public charter school. And what that means is the public charter school still gets public school money, and they had to pick up that IEP. And because it's a charter school, they contract that therapy out to somebody who does speech therapy. So we were actually able to keep our therapist because they use them as a contractor. So there's a lot of ways around it. Again, it depends on your state. HSDLA, which is the Homeschoolers Legal Defense Association, might have some resources. Yeah, they might have some resources. If you're going to pull your child out and file a public or a private school affidavit, a PSA, then generally you will get no help through the school for that in California.
Yes.
So it just kind of depends.
Yeah, you'd have to search your state and kind of know what your options are. Jolie, only because of the time, like I know we're trying to keep it to a half an hour. Do you have any final questions as a newbie homeschooler mom?
No, I mean, I don't think so. It was really interesting. I mean, just a lot of information.
Yeah,
and
it really was.
I think the biggest message, but I've heard this, shared before. I shared this post that I don't know if it was really from a homeschool parent, but it was one of those like letters from a homeschool parent. And it, reiterated a lot of what you said, that in the lower elementary, they only needed, 1 to 2 hours or 1 to 1.5 hours. And then as they get older, but even the older kids only need like 3 or 4 hours, of schooling time, spread, however you do it, and just to kind of give yourself a break. And it's okay, and they'll be fine, and they're still going to learn stuff, and they're still going to go on to the next grade, and they will be fine. The kids even that are graduating, they'll be fine.
Yes, they will. And I would just,
I will crazier, but fun.
Well, and you will be a little crazier too. I would say you'd be hard pressed to find a homeschool parent that is not a little bit crazy. And it's just how it is. Right. We're a little bit different. We walk a different line. You're getting to see what we do every day. My husband still believes that I don't do a lot. He's like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, we did this and this and this. And he's like,
let me call him. Give him my number.
Yeah, I know, right? However, the biggest thing is realize that this takes up a lot more time. You're dealing with 1 or 2 kids in a schoolroom setting. The teacher has 30 or maybe even more. So that's where that stretch comes of the 8 hours. Because if you think about how much time you had to help your child with 1 worksheet, now imagine having to help 29 more kids with that worksheet. And that's why everything takes longer.
Well, so, I mean, can I just say a big shout out to our teachers that have children at home, that are at home teaching their children and teaching our children in a virtual sense. I mean, just the sheer, I don't even know.
I mean, it's a lot. Yeah.
Soul power that it takes for them to do that.
Did you guys see that one, that there was a picture, it went viral, of there was this one child, I don't remember if the child was special needs, but the child was like very upset. And the teacher drove to the house and sat in the driveway, social distance. Did you see it? To read to the child. I thought that was so sweet.
I mean, I can say it takes a special person to be a teacher. It takes a very special person to be a homeschool teacher, because then you're in the situation that you are teaching your children. So you're also parenting and teaching, and they're sort of parenting, teaching in a different sense.
Jolie, you just wanted an opportunity to call yourself special. You're a special needs teacher right now. I think a homeschool teacher, I meant.
Yeah, I think everybody that's homeschooling right now that's not used to homeschooling has to give themselves an extra pat on the back, because
I was talking about people that choose to do it. I'm saying people that choose to become teachers, and people that choose to be homeschoolers. We were thrown into this.
You're kind of choosing it. You could ignore the assignments.
Yeah. I mean, you're doing your kids the best service by following what you're supposed to be doing.
We're choosing to participate.
Exactly. And you're showing them that it's important. And that's part of one of the most important parts of learning, is showing them that learning is important, even during these times, and that it's business as usual as far as that goes.
Right.
Oh, there she is. You want to say hi?
Well,
This
I
is
guess
my
I guess it's about that time.
Yeah.
They're letting us know.
I
So
know.
You need the snack.
yeah, it's been about that time. Well, thank you so much. This was very informative.
Right.
A lot of really good tips, and this will be on Facebook for everybody. And if anyone has any questions, leave them in the comments under the live, and Sarah will be able to get back to you.
Okay, thank you so much. It was great talking to you.